Welcome, everyone. My name's John Ehrman of the Meridian Institute, and I welcome you here to this session where we're going to be focusing on building consensus on what good looks like for credits from tropical forest protection. My colleagues to my left, who will introduce themselves in just a moment, have been working for the last number of months in a collaborative process to develop guidance for companies to understand what good looks like in this very important space. And I'll say more about that in a few minutes, as will my friends. But first, I just would like to also talk a bit about our format for today. We are setting this session up to be heavily focused on questions, so I'll be posing a series of questions to the panelists that'll help explain the work they've been doing, focusing on the context of this work, the content of the work, and what's going to happen next. And they'll all be contributing to painting that picture. We may have a few minutes at the end of the session for questions, which we will entertain, and we also have some cards available at a table over there if you have a question as you leave the session. We're really in the process of collecting feedback and input on this process, and this is just the beginning of that. So if you have any questions or issues you think we should be focusing on going forward, please share those with us. And with that, I'm going to ask my colleagues just to go down the line and introduce themselves. Their names are on the screen, but Josefina, just...
Thank you, John, and good morning, everybody. My name is Josefina Braña Varela, and I am the Vice President and Deputy Lead for Forests and the Forest Climate Lead for WWF. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Claudio Schneider, and I'm with Conservation International in Peru. Pleasure to be here.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Ruben Lubowski. I'm Chief Natural Resource Economist and also Associate Vice President for Natural Climate Solutions at the Environmental Defense Fund, EDF, based in New York. And EDF helped to convene this process over the last several months, and I just want to acknowledge funding from the Bezos Earth Fund that provided important resources that made our collaboration possible.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Martha Fellows. I'm a researcher at the Research Institute of the Amazon, based in Brazil.
Hi, my name is Todd Stevens. I work at the Wildlife Conservation Society in New York City, and I want to say thank you, everyone, for coming out so early and getting through the line.
And I'm Craig Hansen. I'm Vice President for Food, Forest, Water, and the Ocean at the World Resources Institute.
Very good morning. My name is Juan Carlos Hintiach. I'm Shuar Indigenous from Ecuador, Rainforest, and I'm Chief Advisor of Advocacy International Relations of COICA, what is an umbrella indigenous organization in Amazon Basin.
Thank you all. And we're also, I want to note that the Nature Conservancy is also a member of this process and part of the draft agreement that we'll be talking about today. Unfortunately, their representative had illness and isn't able to participate, but otherwise they would have been here with us for today. As we all know from particularly the announcements made yesterday and the work going on in this nature space, the role of forests in addressing climate is becoming more and more clear, more and more significant, and the work that we're here to describe today is a critical part of that as it relates to what does good look like for carbon markets. So we're excited. I think everyone who's involved in forests and climate is very excited about this COP and what's been happening. And we know that forests play an absolutely critical role if we're going to be able to reach the 1.5 target. So this work was undertaken very much in the context of contributing to that endpoint. And what I'd like to do is ask Josefina, to my left here, to respond to kind of a context-setting question in terms of why are tropical forests so critical to meeting the goals of the Paris Agreement, and what's going to be needed to really step up the ambition to accomplish what we need to in the next decade?
Thank you, John. And yes, I mean, the science is clear. We all know. We all are here. I don't need to explain the latest findings, but it's the science, and it's also the reality of many countries where forests are a huge part of their emissions. So for them to meet their climate commitments, they need to, their climate strategy is their forest strategy. They need to align their efforts to tackle deforestation so they can deliver on climate. But beyond that, we must not forget that 1 billion people live in or around the forest and depend on them for shelter, food, medicine, and we all are, our resilience as humans is intrinsically linked to the health of our planet, and therefore we depend on tackling deforestation. To the second part of your question, John, I think what is needed to move the needle and to really halt deforestation is a collaboration as we never seen before, and an alignment of efforts. We need north-south, private, public, supply-demand collaboration, and alignment so we can scale up the impact and really get there at the pace we need. So I am hopeful that the moment is ripe. We're seeing a huge momentum in private sector actors being interested and understanding better the role of forests and why they need to step up and take action. Of course, we want companies to set science-based targets, very ambitious targets that help them address their carbon footprint first, because the homework starts at home, and they need to do their fair share first. But they also can do and must do more, and they should be directing their investments and leveraging their power to advance nature-based solutions like forests are. So I'm very hopeful that we are seeing this momentum, but we are also in this group seeing the necessity to guide those investments, to orient those economic incentives, and to say where is the best sweet spot for these investments to land. And this group came together to take on this challenge, to really have an honest discussion on what it needs to, what it takes to make sure that high integrity markets actually are contributing and are putting people at the center, indigenous peoples and local communities as key drivers and allies to tackle deforestation. So I'm very honored to be here with my colleagues. I'm very grateful that we are willing to share our diversity and our views to try to come up with a clear, unified statement and guidance for corporate partners.
Excellent. Thank you, Josefina. Juan Carlos, what threats are facing tropical forests, and how does it affect indigenous people in your community and the people you work with around the globe?
Thank you very much. We have many threats in our territories, but if I begin to identify or make a list, and it would take longer, but by my friend Josefina was mentioned, many indigenous organizations and also our partners, our NGOs and research institutes, they have a lot of investigation doing in our territories for many years. So we are in the multidisciplinary table, and we analyze how these threats about the multinationals, about oil and gas and illegal minings and cattle ranch and soya beans, etc., etc. And I can go over and over, but in this context, I want to mention something that for us, the legal recent threats, this is one of the reasons that why indigenous organizations need to be together. We need to be making dialogues and with institutions, researchers, and other collaborative. But the science is also mentioned that, recognize that what are our efforts as an indigenous organization, how we are monitoring, because we are people who are walking on the ground in the forest. So saying this, that's why we as my leaders and my friends and my brothers from the ground, for indigenous and local communities, we always claiming about our rights. And one of the rights is that we need to be listening. They listen our rights, they recognize us, and also what we are doing and how is going to be this collaboration in international arena for us. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to say another word or two about the process that's been engaged here over the last months by my colleagues, and then I'll pose a few more questions. So, as Josefina mentioned and Juan Carlos inferred, we know that if we're going to get to scale, we need lots of different types of financing to motivate appropriate behavior around the protection of tropical forests and the people who live in those forests. And carbon markets are one piece of that strategy. And as they've said, it's critical that quality be embedded into the carbon market approach. And so the effort here to develop guidance for companies so they understand what quality looks like on the supply side. This process is focused predominantly on the supply side, if you will, but the group certainly recognizes the importance of addressing demand side considerations as well. But we have, in this process, focused primarily on the supply side. And the group determined early that it was going to be valuable if groups representing the diversity that you see here could come together to develop this guidance. So what we're here to provide you an overview of today is draft guidance that has just been completed in the last week or two. And they wanted to share the highlights of this work at the COP. This is the beginning of a process. There will be a formal consultation that will start later this month where everyone who's interested in these issues will have an opportunity to provide feedback, give guidance, illustrate and highlight issues where more work needs to be done. And they're committed to keep working past this point. But the COP obviously was such an important moment, they wanted to come here to share the work as of where it sits today. And they do have a consensus on the information that they're going to be sharing with all of you. So what I'd like to do next is turn it over to Ruben to provide an overview of the main points of this consensus, this draft consensus, and then we'll follow up with questions for other colleagues to dig a little deeper. Ruben?
Thanks, John. And as John said, we thought it was important for our group of organizations to at least come together to develop a consensus on what companies should be doing in the market for tropical forest carbon credits. And we started with a relatively small group of organizations, but we also understand that we need to broaden and bring others on board from across civil society and also from the private sector and government and others. But we thought it was important for at least our organizations to go through this process. And the highlights are on the screen. The first point is that companies should consider including tropical forest carbon credits in their beyond value chain mitigation strategies. As John said, this is just one piece of what companies can do, but we believe it can be an important piece and should be supplementary to what companies are doing within their own value chains and own abatement efforts, and can also be complementary to other actions that companies can take to address tropical deforestation and protect forests that don't involve crediting, but crediting can play an important role and companies should consider it. Second, companies should prioritize support to programs and projects that are reducing threats to standing tropical forests, including through the purchase of credits. There's been a lot of focus over the past years on removals. We're saying that it's important to protect existing forests and prioritize that in places where deforestation is continuing. At the same time, it is important to be accelerating reforestation and removal efforts, especially as part of comprehensive land use planning in places where there's a jurisdictional approach in place to address deforestation and also promote removals at the same time. Both are important, but we want it to be clear that protecting standing forests is a priority. Also, it's the premise of the process was really to focus on how to differentiate credits in terms of quality and be driving the market towards higher quality. So it's important to ensure that essential components of social as well as environmental integrity are met for all credits purchased, starting with credible accreditation programs and standards, but we recognize that these programs right now don't do everything that's needed, and it's important to supplement them with additional due diligence to address known weaknesses. So some of the elements of environmental integrity may be well known, but we also emphasize various aspects of social integrity, including the importance of free, prior, and informed consent, and also involving Indigenous peoples and local communities and women and other disadvantaged groups, not only as beneficiaries, but importantly as partners from the conceptualization of these programs, the implementation of these programs, and doing so in a really collaborative and intercultural way that is very important. Finally, just want to make sure I got the wording right. To actively push and support a rapid transition to jurisdictional crediting approaches. That was a big focus of our discussion. And we emphasize that this can be done through what companies can purchase right now in the market, but importantly, through forward purchase agreements that companies can make. It's the future demand signal of corporates, we feel, is very important to moving the market from where it is now to where we think it needs to go. And over time, evolve portfolios to include more credits from jurisdictional programs and projects that are fully nested in these programs. And we emphasize that fully nested means nested from an accounting perspective, but also from a programmatic and strategic alignment perspective with what is needed to drive bigger scale of action. And we talk about incentivizing alignment with the Paris Agreement and the enhancement and achievement of nationally determined contributions. The guidance is focused on the voluntary market, but we think that can play an important role in achieving the goals of Paris. And part of that is supporting the implementation of ambitious NDCs, but also the transparency aspects of Paris. So we emphasize that the need for companies to be transparently reporting what they're doing in terms of carbon credit purchases. And finally, over time, a lot of the guidance that we're discussing should be standardized by the standard-setting organizations that certify credit. So the idea is that companies should also be encouraging the standards to be driving movement towards high integrity, jurisdictional, and fully nested credits in the way we described. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Ruben. And the draft document that is available, and we'll give you some information on where to find that at the end of the session, provides a lot more context and rationale for each of these points, but we wanted to provide you with those high-level takeaways. I'm going to now pose some questions to some other colleagues, and Todd, let me start with you. A lot of this work, of course, is grounded in the organizations represented here and the work you've been doing in REDD+ and in various ways over the years. Could you say a little bit about how you see that experience shaping WCS's views and motivation to be part of this process?
Sure. I think it's important to talk about how each of these groups came together with its own theory of changes about what it's doing and shared those. I can give you a little bit, not so much about WCS, but about organizations that develop projects over the last 10 years. I think you've seen some of those lessons, and if people have been to other COPs, they'll talk about the fact that working out things like land tenure, consultations, benefit sharing, equity, the projects did do that, and the best projects did, I think, that very well. But what they also were is that they showed the incredible difficulty of a demand-constrained world, right? What's so interesting, I think, about our history, and I think what we have seen, is that we are flipping from a demand-constrained world to a supply-constrained world. That gives us an amazing opportunity to think bigger, to think larger, and to go beyond projects, to be honest. to see how they fit into jurisdictional. And I, for one, have really enjoyed this process because we've been able to bring some of the things we've learned, but also talk with our colleagues about how to go bigger and how to go at a much greater scale. So thanks.
Thank you very much. Martha, tell us a bit about how jurisdictional REDD has evolved at the subnational, national level in Brazil and the work that EPAM has been so critical for so many years in bringing forward.
Okay, I'm gonna go back a little bit on time just to give some context. So in Brazil, we actually, the state of Acre was the pioneer on developing their own jurisdictional subnational program. And then the country, well, Brazil started to build their own. But as you know, in the past couple of years, our political atmosphere wasn't really in favor to put the effort that we need to implement national jurisdictional program and REDD. Therefore, the states at the Amazon, they got together and started working on their own subnational programs. And the state of Acre and then the state of Mato Grosso were very strong, and they have some programs going on, the early REDD Movers program. And now 8 states of the Brazilian Amazon, they're part of the LEAF coalition that EPAM helped to build. And now we are moving on towards defining the mechanisms to assure that everything is going in a good path with this quality that we are pursuing towards safeguards and how to monitor deforestation rates and so on. So I would like to stress.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Juan Carlos, why is this process important for COICA's member organizations, and tell us more about the outreach process that you and your colleagues have been so wonderful and engaging in bringing not just COICA's perspectives, but a broader set of perspectives into these conversations.
Indigenous organization, for many years, we are working to bring our voices from the ground to the international arena. And the international arena recognizing how we are organized as governance structure. It's not just one simple organization from one part of the forest, no. We are very well connected. We have our communities level coordination, national and regional umbrella, and then the international arena. In the international arena, COICA has a lot of experience for many years. In the international arena, COICA was bringing how we are working with our Indigenous Amazon agenda. This Indigenous Amazon agenda is a topic about rights and forests and initiatives, what we are doing. So in the international arena, we recognize that we have rights on the table. And this is one of the principles. So what does that mean that we bring this on the table? Because we say free, pre-informed consent before to go any kind of projects in our territories. These processes takes time sometimes to bring international arena, but we are not going to fail at that, because all the leaders, we know that we need to bring our voices and our rights into the context. It's difficult, but this is a challenge for us. In that context, as indigenous organizations from the Amazon Basin, we are connected with other organizations in the region. That's why we want to connect how we are working with our experience about these dialogues from our own perspective, our own dynamics, assemblies, because we have our way institution to work inside for many years. And then We have other colleagues on the tropical line globally, the forest. We are talking about this context. I said, okay, we have experience. We were doing this for many years. We know how to put in the respect context. We need to respect each other. Even that the vision is very different. We respect that. If you respect that in the table, and then you can put your idea in different perspective if you don't agree. But if you respect that, that's one of the principles. We need to respect the visions. Saying that, COIC organization is very well organized with good governance, all members, and we are doing our workshops in Brazil, and then we want to do in Central America, and maybe, why not, on other tropical organizations on the global, because we have experience and we want to share our brothers and sisters. And we don't want to lose this opportunity to go forward. To finalize, what I'm saying that I think so, we, as a several regions, or indigenous organizations globally, we have many proposals from the ground. We are looking for international opportunity to connect funds and also to support our initiatives of how we are managing for many years our forests. That's what I can say right now, but it's that we are welcoming and we are bringing, we are doing a step, but in the context that you need to respect our rights and our own principles. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And as one who's facilitated and mediated a lot of processes over the years, I think the engagement of COICA, EPAM, as well as the other organizations, the way they work together and come together to understand the respective needs and interests has been a key part of the success that they've had so far. And so particular thanks to COICA for your leadership in that aspect of the process. It's been vital. I want to turn to Ruben and Todd to say a word about a particular aspect of this draft guidance that has to do with the interplay between projects and jurisdictions. Those who are familiar with this space, I think, understand, and it's already been alluded to, that there's been some creative tension between groups who have experience in different parts and desires that different theories of change, as Todd said. So if you two could share a bit about the way the group has approached those issues, I think that'd be very helpful.
Sure, thanks. And I come from an environmental defense fund, and our theory of change has been very much focused on trying to drive a market with private sector action at the jurisdictional level. So for large-scale programs that are reducing deforestation. And that's been our focus. As part of this process, it became clear that it's very important to think about how country circumstances are very different. So we decided to segment the guidance in terms of three tiers or three different types of situations for countries and jurisdictions. You can imagine a set of jurisdictions where these large-scale jurisdictional programs are already in place and being registered and validated by internationally recognized standards and can be expected to be delivering credits in the relatively near term. And so that's one set of jurisdictions. Another set is where jurisdictional programs are moving forward and are in progress, but will take longer, but are still expected in the near to medium term to have credits that can be issued. And when we talk about these jurisdictional credits, that includes credits at the jurisdictional level, but also projects that are fully nested within these jurisdictional programs. So that's the second situation. And then there's also a context where jurisdictional programs aren't expected or likely to come online in the near or medium term due to capacity challenges or governance challenges. So we thought about each of these situations, and then for each of them, try to establish some guidance for what companies can do in terms of current purchases of credits, as well as future agreements for forward purchases of credits, in terms of credits that are available right now, and also existing projects that are right now, and what kind of conditions to apply to those, and screening, as well as what to require in terms of new projects that haven't yet been implemented in each of these contexts. So that's how we segmented the guidance, and then we also have a table that lays this out in the draft guidance that also identifies additional considerations that companies should look for in each of these situations.
Okay, so is this working? Okay, I want to say quickly a thanks to one of my team, Stephanie Wong, who spent an incredible amount of time trying to get this graph to some sort of consensus agreement. Because Ruben makes it sound easy, but this was not easy. Because what it does is it captures what's going on right now, which is jurisdictions applying to leave, jurisdictions trying to create those credits. It captures projects that are in the process of being nested. It also captures countries and projects where that's not possible now. And it accepts that reality, but charts change and progress that we can all get behind. So you'll see, we want jurisdictional credits to expand in a major way, in a high quality way. And we give some guidance both to our dreams for it to expand, but also under what terms. We also talk about what fully nested means. We see those both as projects, but also growing. But we also see the movement of those projects that in some cases are standalone to become nested, to become part of jurisdictional systems. But we acknowledge the different situations that countries are in, the different kinds of financing that's going to come. And we hopefully are coming together to chart a world, hopefully where we're able to sort of fulfill the promise of nature-based solutions.
Very good. Thank you both. Craig, how does the work of this group contribute to and reinforce other initiatives and processes that are going on in this whole movement toward high integrity carbon markets from the WRI perspective and from your work in this process?
Yeah, great, thanks. And I'll highlight three things. So first of all, the working group, the consensus document, focuses a lot on supply side integrity. It does point, though, to the importance of demand side integrity. And as one of the panelists said, it highlights the importance that homework begins at home. I think you mentioned that here, right? So it makes that point, right? That then credits come, in complement to that. I think it's an important point that I think all the organizations agree to, and it's a message that I think the external world needs to hear too, right? This isn't just a supply side. You need supply side guardrails as well as demand side guardrails, and those demand side guardrails need to be linked to science-based targets, right, going forward, et cetera. So we're not talking classic Kyoto-style offsets anymore. We're in a new world, right, in terms of this. The second one is the emergence just recently of the Integrity Council for Voluntary Carbon Markets. I think we all recognize that voluntary carbon markets need a stronger degree of legitimacy, right, and integrity across the board. And so that body has emerged. Some of us are engaged with that body as well. I think that's an important signal. I think it was kind of originally signaled by the Carney Task Force, but then built upon that. That's an important body that's out there that I think this effort here can hand them a vision of what that supply side integrity looks like, meet this bar. So I think that's super important. The third area is the Science-Based Targets Initiative, which started out maybe 5 years ago as a little bit of a dream. It's like 1,900 companies now, right? It's exceeded the partner organization's expectations of how much buy-in and it is there. And I think, as one of my colleagues on the stage here said, you may have lived in a demands-constrained world. In a couple of years, it ain't going to be that way anymore, right? The demand is there. The companies are really companies around the world are taking science-based targets really, really seriously. If you noted last week, the SBTI announced its net zero guidance. It's the framework, and they're going to build upon it as well. But it did create space for, say, REDD plus credits, high integrity credits here from tropical forest conservation as well as from forest restoration, namely saying that, yes, companies need to set a science-based targets consistent with getting to 1.5 degrees, but that they should, right, which is protocol language for expect, right, or shall, right, they should go beyond their own value chain mitigation, right, and the type of stuff that this consensus document is talking about would be eligible for that. So watch that space. The details are still to be worked out in the next steps on that one. But I think that's another initiative that I would argue is the biggest demand side driver right now that we need to make sure that we are speaking to.
Great. Thank you, Craig, very much. Claudio, Conservation International has extensive experience working in the field on carbon market projects, et cetera, as well as obviously bringing that expertise into this process. Tell us how you see this unfolding on the ground level, and how you see that informing the additional work that this group will be doing going forward.
Yes, thank you very much. First of all, I want to say that an initiative like this is extremely timely. I think people like me that have been involved in the development of high-quality carbon projects for about over 10 years are really thrilled and excited to see this. But we cannot do this in isolation. And I think effective collaboration is key. And what I mean by effective collaboration is that all the stakeholders, such as government, indigenous communities, the private sector, should be directly involved in the development of these initiatives. I think one of the successes we have had in Peru is that we started early on to work very closely with the Park Service in the development of REDD project. And that has enabled us basically to have a seat at the table with the government of Peru to develop the nested process for REDD, the nested approach for REDD, okay? So having governments understand the importance of the carbon market early on is very, very, very important. Similar with indigenous communities. Indigenous communities need to be front and center in the development of these initiatives. Not just as partners, but leading these initiatives too. And this is something that we are now doing in Peru with the Indigenous REDD initiative. We're also talking about jurisdictions. Jurisdictions need enabling conditions. We need to work closely with governments to create those enabling conditions that provide the certainty for the private sector to invest in those jurisdictions. And this is a very important collaborative work that we need to accomplish together. I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you very much. Josefina, talk a bit about how you and WWF see this work on crediting in the larger context of moving to these jurisdictional approaches and both designing and implementing them effectively going forward.
Thanks, John. I guess what I'd like to highlight is it's not only about crediting, but it's about crediting and non-crediting opportunities, interventions, initiatives. And I said we need to talk about both, because the credit space, if done right, and this is what we are trying to guide, we're trying to help companies, corporations, donors to be able to differentiate the good, the bad, and the ugly. And we need that, and we want to influence that space so it's useful and it's productive and it adds up. But these two pieces of the puzzle, the crediting and non-crediting pathways, are complementary. So let's not forget, as my colleague Claudio just said, we need a lot of finance. We need a scale of finance for implementation. If we are going to be providing results and we are going to get to crediting and to really show, yeah, there's results, there's carbon credits available, we need the groundwork and the investments and the support to get there. So these two pieces are complementary. We need all, as I mentioned, I mean, the size of the problem and the complexity of the problem of deforestation is huge, and we need all resources in our toolbox. Credits are one tool that, if done right, could be very important contribution. But we need to think a little bit more integrally about what needs to happen on a landscape. So instead of like leading with the tool, let's lead with the landscape. What a given landscape needs? What is happening there? What are the drivers of deforestation? characterize interventions that you need to attack those drivers, and then seek the sources of finance that are more appropriate to fund those interventions. We need to lead with the landscapes and the territory needs, and therefore we need to, by design, include the voices of indigenous peoples and local communities to help us identify what are the interventions that need to happen, where in the jurisdiction, which stakeholders are involved, and then connect the right sources of finance. I think this is important to acknowledge, because I think it's not one or the other. We are talking about we need all and everything. And one key message from this group, I think, is recognizing that we cannot be working in our corners as NGOs, or we cannot have like governments working there and private sector working there. That's not useful, and in many cases lead us to undermine each other's efforts. What we need is to align, find the North Star, understand what high quality is, what is needed, and then all hands on deck with the eyes on the prize and all marching into the same direction.
Thank you. Well put. Juan Carlos, I know you may need to leave in a moment for another important meeting. Any final comments or thoughts that you want to share at this point?
Thank you, John. I've been listening to these excellent panelists here, and I was trying to bring in my memory how we were coming here to these international meetings, how we are prepared on the ground with our work, what we are doing, how we are managing our forests. But we need to transmit that in a specific key scientific language. Sometimes they don't understand. They say, what are the Indians doing? What are the Indians claim? But sometimes this is, like Claudio mentioned, Josefina and other colleagues, that there's a moment, a key moment that we sit down, and that's always what I bring. I think we need to talk. We need to with respect, even that we know what we have it. We know how we are suffering. We know all these threats on the ground. But we have governance. We have institutions. And for many years, and then my brothers and my sisters, and also who are talking with these brothers and sisters who are isolated in the middle of the forest until right now, 21st century. But it's bringing in my mind that when in the convention appear REDD plus or REDD plus plus acronyms, and then we need to transform this language and the local community, local language. And then with the PAN, how was mentioned, we have experience doing some workshops on the ground. We have experience. We have experience. My leaders, they are sitting here with me. You know, it's a challenge to have here to learn English. Even it's no mother tongue, but we are doing our best. Every day we learn, and it's not impossible to sit down. So I will say that I have nice memories because many people, and then we are suffering, and then but we have proposals. We are working there. We have data. You need to help us to connect that, but you know how to connect that, put in the table, talk to governments, to key actors with financial resources. Science recognized. Yeah, they are talking about the IPCC and the other many specific languages there, but can we do the next step that we have our rights, but we have the proposals? I mean, recognize that and to link it that and to combine. It's not really that difficult, but sometimes maybe that will be simple, but the process, like you mentioned, is harder. With respect, I think so we can go forward and save this planet. We don't have time. We are really doing the things on the home. But the threats that you were mentioning, John, in the beginning, this is a long list. Yeah, but I respect that, but we don't want, they've been killing us. No, we don't want that. The life is precious. But this one of the threats, they are killing us. But this is not possible. No anymore. We want to live and propose. That I will say my final points here. And I'm really sorry I have to run to meet other global indigenous people. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Juan Carlos. Wonderfully said. And thanks for the leadership that I know you're going to engage in right now with your brothers and sisters. So thank you. A couple more questions, and I would also say if anyone in the audience has a question, kind of be thinking about that. I'll turn to see if there are any audience questions here in just a moment. But Craig, could you say a little more about kind of how, I mean, WRI works in a plethora of different forums, different approaches. As you mentioned, of course, you're part of SPTI and the partnership with WWF and others. How do you see this process kind of moving forward? And you mentioned this a little bit in your comments, but what do you see as kind of the challenges and opportunities associated with continuing to work in this kind of collaborative approach around these carbon market issues as it fits into the overall strategy?
Well, I guess I'd see more opportunities than challenges. I mean, even just given that everything has happened even yesterday, right? This issue is just growing in urgency. And so I think we've done a really good job, all the partners here and my colleagues, Francis Seymour and others who represent WRI in this process have done a very good job of getting to this consensus document. And as you opened up, this is a stage in the process, right? There's more to be done. But I think we've crossed the Rubicon in some, a number of ways and actually nailed down some of the really tough, thorny issues. There'll be some more, but my sense is some of the big ones have been addressed. And now I think we need to make sure that we continue at pace, right? That might be our biggest challenge, is the speed of advancing the thinking and being public about it, because the world is moving on, right? The Integrity Council's out there. You've got, LEAF is out there, et cetera. We need to make sure that we're ready with the messages and the consensus. I think one of the most powerful things of this process is you have some of the largest, most well-known, environmental NGOs. You have Indigenous community representation, think tanks, et cetera, as part of this. And if we all can come out with a unified message of this is what the good looks like, this is what is expected of you, right? That's going to send some clarity in the marketplace, right? Because the last thing, when I talk to companies, the last thing they want is to do something, and then WF says, fantastic, right? And then 3 weeks later, someone else comes out and says, no, that's the wrong thing, right? And here's why. Because then they give up, right? And they say, then that's how you kill demand, right? When there's a lack of trust or a belief that I just don't know whether or not I'm doing the good or not. Our proposition here, and I think we're on that pathway, is to be able to send that signal so that demand side will know that, okay, if I meet these requirements, I can rest assured that I've achieved that high quality.
Great. Any other colleagues want to kind of build on that perspective about the process going forward?
No.
No? Anything else on that point? Are there any questions or comments that anyone would like to share from our audience here? Yeah, if we can get a microphone to, thank you. Just identify yourself just so we understand who's.
Sure. Hi, I'm Ed Mitchard from the University of Edinburgh. I use satellite data to look at forests. I've been asked a lot by companies recently about whether they can really trust the permanence of particularly REDD credits, of avoid deforestation credits. I strongly believe that private sector carbon offsets are the way to get money into this, but lots of companies are getting scared that consumers are going to worry that they're just delaying deforestation by 5 years and not really transforming a landscape to forests permanently. What should I tell them?
Who would like to take that? That's a really critical question, important question. Josefina? Yeah, could we use that? There we go.
That's a great question, and a question that has been addressed many times again and again in this process during 10 years of negotiations leading to REDD Plus and the inclusion of forest in the Paris Agreement. It's important to have why we are talking about scale and moving towards jurisdictional approaches is precisely to manage some risks like the issue of permanence. What we want to do with these efforts to tackle deforestation, REDD Plus, efforts supported by the LEAF Coalition, it's not a forest project, it's actually systems transformation. So that's why we want to have elements that are not only carbon, but actually put people at the center, understand what are the nature trade-offs, and integrate solutions in the landscape that are going to help with the permanence issue. If we focus in that systems transformation and really tackling the drivers at the scale they operate, I think the issue of the permanence becomes less important. I mean, there's always the need to work, obviously, to avoid reversals and to guarantee the permanence in the long term. But I think like the proposition of this group is get into jurisdiction, get into the scale where the drivers operate, and then we will have better chances. I hope that helps.
Other comments on that? Yeah, Todd, please.
So I think it's a great question. I really agree with what Josefina said. I think what is interesting about this guidance is it both charts that direction to deal with these issues, but also demands immediate action and gives some guidance to companies about how they can do something now, because many of those questions are about what do I do now? So we think we provided an answer that both gives them guidance to now and guidance for them to shape a future that we all are working towards. And I think for me, that's what's so gratifying about this type of guidance.
Ruben, did you want to add?
Maybe just to add that as part of that, there's a variety of ways that the standards deal with the issue of permanence, including issues like conservative crediting and creating buffer accounts. At the end of the day, though, if you don't destroy a forest today, that forest can be destroyed later. At the same time, if you don't burn a ton of coal today, that ton of coal can also be burned later. These issues have often been thought about as a special consideration for the land sector, but they're really generic issues that apply to any mitigation. And part of what our guidance is trying to say is that the way to really achieve permanence is to drive these systemic transformations, as Josefina was saying, and also supporting these larger scale programs that are really addressing the fundamental drivers of the deforestation and trying to shift to a new model of development, including through the development of these jurisdictional programs, but also by addressing through high quality projects that can be also trying to address these fundamental drivers and moving towards systemic change. And that's what's needed in the land sector. It's also what's needed across all sectors.
Claudio.
Thank you. Yes, I think it's important for us to value nature properly. Conserving nature, conserving ecosystems is not cheap. So we need to make sure that initiatives like this drive responsible, strong markets with good prices. I think the carbon price needs to go up significantly to be able to have the resources that we need to face the incredible economic forces that are driving deforestation too. And I think the regulation, the standards are going to take us to that place too.
Thank you. Any other questions come? Yes, there's a couple. Here we go. Thank you, Kristen.
Hello, I'm Nadine Stuber, the Global Offsetting Manager at Nestle, and I just want to know how you reply to environmentalist groups that worry that jurisdictional approaches might reduce the access of local communities to carbon rights or being able to sell carbon credits, and also indigenous groups, which is some of the criticism that the LEAF has seen recently. Thank you.
Who'd like to take that one? Claudio? Yeah, use that, yeah.
Well, we're addressing that directly in Peru with an initiative where we are having indigenous organizations lead or be the proponents of their own carbon conservation initiatives or projects too. So we're technical advisors. They're going to lead, and we want them to have the capacities to engage the private sector directly in the negotiations that need to take place for this, and the governments as well in the jurisdictions where these communities are. I think this is crucial. It's important for them to be front and center, as I mentioned, of these initiatives too.
Any other? Yeah, Josefina?
Well, yeah, just to add to that comment, I mean, I think we are committed as organizations to keep elevating the voices of indigenous peoples and local communities and to make sure that they have pathways to engage. But in addition to that, I can tell you that we in WLF, we won't stop asking for direct access, for indigenous peoples to have direct access to resources and to be able to shape and design their own initiatives without having to go through different channels. So we need both. Each context is very different. Not all indigenous peoples are the same, right? Like we are all people, we are diverse and different, they are as well. So we need different approaches. But working with allies, as Claudio is saying, like we should be allies. We all should be allies for indigenous peoples and local communities and have a diverse way to enter, for them to get access. Sorry, Ruben, you want to
I'll just add that that's one of the reasons we really appreciate COICA being part of the process and really emphasizing the needs for social integrity. And one of the points we emphasize is that there's often requirements built into standards. For example, the R3 standard that LEAF is using, there are various requirements around the Cancun safeguards and other requirements, but it's also important for companies to be making sure these are really being respected in practice, not just on paper. And that's part of what we tried to emphasize in the guidance, that there needs to be special attention to be doing due diligence on that, and also to be really considering programs that are led and proposed directly by indigenous peoples and local communities.
I think there was one more. We have time maybe for one more or two. Let's see.
Thank you. I'm Jennifer Morris with the Nature Conservancy. So first of all, I just want to congratulate this group. This was quite a challenging process. I was part of the challenge, I think.
No.
But it was really, has been very, very interesting discussion. My question is about the speed of creating real jurisdictions, both demarcating them and then doing the nesting work, setting the reference levels, et cetera. I mean, one of the challenges that we're seeing is that governments have been quite slow to do this. So do we just wait for that? We know that we're going to say high quality projects are fine, but I think it's just really important to understand the challenges of doing things at a jurisdictional level. And for us, as we think about moving forward, pushing for that to happen, but also recognizing, and you've said this, but just the critical importance of continuing to get money to forest-dependent communities around the world while we wait for that we shouldn't stop. Because if we do, we're going to lose a lot more forest, and we're going to really continue to see impoverished communities not be able to thrive on their natural capital. So I'd just love to hear how we as a global community are pushing and helping and supporting that move to jurisdictions, because that's a huge barrier that I'm not sure we've emphasized enough.
No, thank you very much, and thanks for being here. Comments on that? Yeah. Use that mic there. Or who wants to? Todd, you want to go ahead? Yeah.
One thing I'd say, and thank you for your support of the process. I think all of us would point to our CEOs and thank you for their support, because we appreciate putting our logos on these. I think one way I might describe that is the challenges you're talking about are very real. They're challenges that a lot of groups have been working for a decade on. You know, it's not just been project work for the last decade. A lot of countries, a lot of jurisdictions have done a lot of work to get ready. But what I'd say is, what I think came out of this was a synergy, is understanding that both of those streams of work are actually pushing toward a common goal. So when you ask, do you stop one, do you start the other, the hope is that that's a false trade. And the hope is that we point some guidance to doing that together. There's urgency about nesting, to be honest, and that urgency is real and communicated in this document. So that for me was one of my takeaways, is a sense, as Josefina said, of solidarity and synergy about the various things that we're doing.
And thanks, Jen, for that question. Good to see you. The other point is that I was trying to say is we need crediting and non-crediting. So credits, carbon markets done right, great. Transition to jurisdictional might take a while, but there's a huge opportunity to advance in non-crediting pathways, and we are seeing corporates willing to come into landscape partnerships without needing to have a credit as a result. So I think we can do advance in those pathways and actually synergize them, so to leverage and catalyze actions to get us where we want to go. We do acknowledge that what we are trying to do is systems transformation and transition to low carbon development at large scale. So it's not going to happen overnight, but we need to keep trying and we need to keep the eyes on the prize, because this is what it's going to take for us to halt deforestation.
I think Craig had go ahead, Ruben, then we'll go to Craig.
I agree with everything that's been said. Also, part of what we emphasize is that having forward purchase commitments of companies, so with real private sector agreements for funding in the future at the jurisdictional scale, that can play a very important role in then organizing and mobilizing action and finance upfront to help deliver on that, even when it's not fully in place right now. But having that forward signal of finance can be very important to accelerate the process.
Craig, go ahead, and then we're going to need to wrap up because we have another event in this space. But go ahead, Craig.
Just on that question, a couple things, right? I think we are entering a new world here, right? You've got LEAF, you have this, you have others that are sending the signal that jurisdictions are the future, right? And things are moving there. This is what this consensus statement is saying, right? And so I think that's a signal that would get countries that are maybe behind the curve, right, more engaged on this. I think it's incumbent on each and every one of our organizations, as well as our peers, to be supporting countries in moving more towards jurisdictional approaches as well. So the burden's a bit on us. I also think that there's a demand signal out there now than that probably wasn't a couple years ago. That might be that should help push and accelerate progress.
Very good. Well, let me, by way of summary, just quickly a couple points. First of all, this draft consensus statement on high-quality tropical forest carbon credits, we will be launching a formal consultation by the end of the month that'll be widely advertised to various sectors, corporate, NGO, indigenous people, et cetera. And all of our organizational partners here will be also reaching out through their own networks. You can currently find a copy of this draft statement at that website. This is a draft version. We are not going to modify the version between today and when it goes out for the formal consultation. So if you take a look at this, you have any comments, please, we're happy to receive those, but we're not doing another iteration until it goes out in its current form to the larger network. And then, of course, the colleagues will be reviewing the comments that come in and taking those into account as they move forward to get more granularity and detail about a number of the recommendations. This is a draft consensus. This isn't just a thought piece. I want to emphasize that. These groups have worked very hard. Meridian's been honored and pleased to help support the process. And I want to congratulate all of the participating organizations, including the Nature Conservancy, who's not sitting up here, but is sitting back there, for the work that's gone into this up to this point. But this is just one step forward in an ongoing process to bring together the issues, ideas, and priorities that our groups have been talking about in the last hour or so. So we thank you all for participating and being here with us today, and we invite you to participate as the process goes forward with your input, your ideas, and your energy. So thank you all.